Good evening and welcome to our second event in our series of Managing the New Normal. And this evening we'll be talking about flexibility and flexible working in particular. We're really pleased this evening to be able to introduce Elizabeth Pears to the event. And she is UK news editor at BuzzFeed News, and she'll be talking to us about flexible working. And my colleague Hannah will be asking her some questions. So we'll get started straight away, but welcome Elizabeth, welcome Hannah, and off we go.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much.
Good to
and
be
thank
here.
you so much for joining, Elizabeth. So I just want to kick us off. So as Matt said, you're a news editor, and what I'd love to know initially is what your thoughts are on the kind of big question, but the COVID-19 crisis so far in terms of that, and how you've been reporting on public sentiment.
Well, from a news perspective, this is for many people, and I don't care what age you are, for many people in journalism, for most people, this is the story of a lifetime. It's unprecedented. It's affected the way that people live. It's affected the environment. It's affected the economy. It's affected families. You know, people have lost loved ones, and I think you can't really underline that enough. Just that for every number, every figure, there's a whole personal story behind that. This has changed the way that people live. And in terms of reporting, well, over the years, we've just seen how technology has changed reporting. And so in many ways, reporters were able to kind of transition quite quickly into, working from home. We've seen newsreaders who do broadcasting from their homes. And people have been able to use Skype, Zoom, all of these tools that we have at our disposal to make connections and interview people. You know, we've had reporters, interview, ask questions in press conferences from the comfort of their own kitchens. And so we've kind of made it work. And one of the things that we really wanted to focus on was people. And so telling the stories of people who've been affected by COVID-19. And, we've done that pretty well without having to, physically be there. Although you can't really, there's no replacement being there, but you can work around it with the aid of technology.
That's fantastic. And I feel like the news is such a vital source in this time because, as you said, it reminds us that there is a very human face to this crisis, as well as providing us with very urgent and up-to-the-minute information. So I'm curious, what do you think the dominant narrative has been in the media in relation to working, and particularly maybe flexible working, as so many people have had to move to home working where they can?
Yeah. Well, very quickly, I think the idea of home working has opened up a conversation between, or has laid bare, I think, some of the inequalities in society, because there are people who can work from home and people who can't work from home. And when you look at the type of jobs and roles, you realize that actually a lot of the jobs where you are able to work from home independently, they tend to be a little bit more higher paid, rather than maybe some of the other like service jobs where you have to kind of be hands-on. That's not the case in every respect, but that's one of the conversations that have been done. The second thing that I think is really interesting, and in many ways I think this is positive in terms of thinking about the future, is that a lot of the time companies have always felt that you have to be present. There is this kind of idea of, your boss wanting to have access to you, to be able to see what you're doing, to be able to go over to your computer and check on how you're working. And people have found that actually working from home can be very productive. And, there are people who have disabilities, people who have, mental health challenges, people who have geographical challenges, because, let's face it, for example, if you live in London, a lot of people can't afford to buy a home in London and they live further out in Reading or Leeds or Birmingham. And instead, they're finding that those barriers have now gone. You can work from a home that is modified to your physical needs. You can work from a home that, might be out in the countryside with the aid of technology. So I think that things that people thought we couldn't do, we can now do. And, I think the big story this week has really been Twitter, which has said, hey, our workforce has been absolutely productive working from home. From now on, we're going to let people work from home if they think that's the right thing for them. Obviously, yes, come into the office, have FaceTime with your colleagues when social distancing has been eased. But it's just, it's created a lot of opportunities. And I would love at the end of this to be able to see people have a bit more quality of life, and for people, I think, especially people with disabilities, to be able to get roles, to work in companies, to be able to be promoted, and to have the option of working from home, where perhaps like public transport might not always be suited to their needs. If you can work from home, then those barriers aren't there. So it's going to create, I think, lots of opportunities, but that's a little bit in the future.
I think that's amazing. I absolutely hope that we see a future of more accessible workplaces. Do you think we'll see, because as you mentioned, so Twitter has been a particularly high profile case. Do you think we'll see other major organizations making this shift or kind of creating this space in the future?
Yeah, I think that sometimes the tech companies are going to be like, or the bigger companies are going to be the market leaders. So, once they've started, other companies might look at it as well. But, I guess they're not the first. I mean, just from the top of my head, I know of friends who work in the gaming industry, for example. And when, the economy wasn't doing so well, they realized, like, we've got this really expensive office in London. We can't afford to pay the rent, but actually we're an e-company, we're an internet company. We don't have to have people physically in the office. And so they were able to give up their very expensive office space and keep jobs. And I think in the grand scheme of things, apart from the property developers, if you can keep people in employment, a lot of people win. And so I think that people are going to look at the benefits of this. And I think, if you're talking bigger picture, you're thinking about, the environment or having more cycling. If people can work at home, you can actually you can improve quality of life, I think, by taking the pressure off the roads and stuff like that, and the traffic. Maybe you can take your kids to school, and come home and still be able to do, a good shift. So I think flexible working there is no going back. Pandora's box is open, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the best kind of Pandora's box. And I like what you said as well. It's flexible working isn't just you're not working in the office, but you can work flexible hours as well, and that accommodates things like parents having to do a school run. It's almost not about the hours, it's about your output, if you will.
Yeah.
So
I was just going to say, just because
carry on.
Over the years, sometimes HR, people who really love that kind of testing people's personality and bringing your whole self to work, that kind of thing. There are some people who are way more productive in the evening and people who are way more productive in the morning, and actually having different hours or staggered hours can actually get the best out of people. And I think that's really important. And particularly for my industry, journalism, it's not 9 to 5. And so instead of having journalists, clock in at 9 a.m., clock out at 5 p.m., which we never do, we probably work until the story. But you can actually modify that, and you can have a lot more of a staggered workplace. And it's just the way that the future is going. I think there's no stopping it.
Amazing. And so kind of circling back to what you were saying about journalism and dominant narratives, do you think there have been stories that are less represented in relation to flexible working, or any issues that have been, or voices that have been less widely acknowledged?
Yeah, I think as ever, and journalists, we try to speak truth to power. And I think that, one of the things is you've seen people who almost have no choice, about going to work and having to work. So people like, carers, for example, they have been getting some media coverage, but there are a lot of people, delivery drivers, Uber drivers, people who work in the gig economy. And I think people who work in the gig economy who don't have, a lot of like the rights that people have in, like full-time staff contracts, I don't think their voices are being heard. And, they're citizens, they're raising families, they're supporting people. And it would be good for them who do such a valuable job. People love their Uber driver, they love Deliveroo. And it's just interesting to see how the things that you need when you get down to crunch time are not necessarily rewarded proportionally. So I think that the media has focused on a lot of the important issues, carers, care homes, the NHS workers, they are wondrous, wondrous people. But there are a lot of other people out there who are doing small but important jobs. So, for example, in my personal life, since this all started, I've reconnected with the milkman. He brings milk, yogurt, bread, eggs. And it's really nice. It's like really lovely to have that kind of relationship with small business owners, and, you know, local produce and all that kind of thing. So that's been quite nice.
For sure. I notice I've spent so much more time at home and discovered local organizations and workers that I'm supporting a lot more than I did when I was commuting in and out of central London and spending that chunk of my day just away from home. And I wonder if do you think we'll maybe see economic benefits in that as well? Like if people spend more time at home, they'll maybe feed into local communities more.
I think since we've been, you know, since everybody's been at home, at least for me, a lot of people that I know, like through the networks, community networks, a lot of people have quickly amended their businesses. So, for example, there was in my neighborhood, there was a guy who had an events company. He quickly pivoted to a fruit and vegetable company. People really love that. So he delivers in the local area and the surrounding bits and pieces. So there are opportunities. And then you think about it, you think, well, people really like this service, and you see every week he's adding new suppliers, new businesses, and you think this is the beginning of something. You know, not everybody might want to go back to a big supermarket at the end of this. Perhaps people will want to continue having local produce delivered, and then you just create new opportunities. So I think, you know, you can make no bones about it. A lot of people are going to suffer economically, and perhaps a lot of people are going to have a change of career. But as ever, in times of crisis, opportunities do open up. And I think a lot of people are going to transition into different things. And so you just, it's really interesting. And as a journalist, I just sit back and I kind of look at it as history is rewriting itself. And so I'm a little bit of a sociologist in that way.
That's amazing. Well, I love that. I think we can end that there on that gorgeous note. We are living history rewriting itself as we speak. And I hope you have many, many, many more interesting stories to tell.
I can't wait to see how it all goes.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Elizabeth. It's been gorgeous talking to you.
Oh, thank you, Hannah.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Elizabeth. And just a quick kind of shout out to all our watchers as well, that if you have any questions, then obviously do post them in the comments and react to what you're seeing on screen. We'll try and answer those as best we can as we go through the event. But thanks ever so much, Elizabeth, and hope you'll be able to kind of come back and join us in CMI Women again soon and share your experiences even further.
I hope so. I mean, who knows? All right then. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Great, and thanks so much, Hannah. So next up, we're going to introduce another of my new colleagues, Madalena, who joined again very recently and joined remotely and has been working remotely ever since in our research and insights team. And we're going to talk through a little bit of the research that we've done recently, which was taken just before the government guidance was published over the weekend. And so, Madalena, welcome. And perhaps you can tell us a little bit about that research. I believe we spoke to more than 1,000 practicing managers. So what did they say?
Hi, Matt, and hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. I'm very glad to be here tonight. So, yes, you are correct. We did run a poll last week before the government released the guidance, and just over 1,000 managers took part in the poll. And the poll was aimed to get the views and opinions of managers in advance of the government releasing this new guidance on how to come back to the workplace, and if that was going to happen sooner rather than later. So what we found was that managers were concerned, and understandably, about returning to their workplace, even though they were feeling confident about implementing the government's guidance. Half of them thought it would take a couple of weeks or more to implement the guidance, and they were expecting both short-term and long-term financial implications for their businesses. Okay,
so we know that there's some concern. We know that it's not going to be straightforward. And we've heard earlier from Elizabeth there, some people will be expected to return to workplaces, and others will continue to be working from home for quite some time by the sounds of it. So what did our research tell us about home working in particular?
So we asked managers about both their organization, and also about the team that they manage. How are things in regards to home working? And at the organization level, the majority of managers, that is 97% of those that took part, reported that at least some staff in the organizations are home working during the crisis. But a higher proportion of managers reported that the team they directly manage are currently home working. And that is just over 3/4 stated that all or most staff are home working. So there's a distinction, because at the level of the organization, even though we had a majority, it was at least some are working, whereas in terms of the teams, it's either all or most.
And it would be great to hear from those watching as well. If you can comment and let us know, will you be home working? Will you be returning to a workplace? And any questions as well on the research as we're discussing it, please do let us know and interact as much as possible. One thing we're keen to understand really is, are businesses keen? Do we know if businesses are keen to actually return to the workplace?
So for businesses to returning to the workplace, they need to be aware of the government guidance. So we did ask them, the managers, are you aware of the government releasing guidance, and are you aware of any details of the guidance? And just over half had an awareness that the government was going to release the guidance and some of the detail. So with that in mind, 2/3 of the managers reported that their organizations wanted to return to the workplace, but it would definitely depend on the guidance. And only a small proportion, and we're talking under 10%, were looking to return immediately after the government would release the guidance. And surprisingly, 15% have no plans to return to the office because they can do their work just fine from home.
Which I think reflects what Elizabeth was just saying as well, the fact that this has been really significant shift to flexible working for many people, and for some time really. So how do we intend to track the impact of flexible working through our research?
So at the moment, we do run regular surveys and polls, and I strongly encourage members to engage with this. The greater the number of respondents, the greater the variety of members taking part, and so the more representative our findings are of the CMI community. And I also want to highlight the launch of our exclusive community Manager's Voice at the end of this week. So please do keep an eye out and get involved, because the Manager's Voice community will provide you with the opportunity to have your say on a regular basis on a series of important topics in these very unusual times, but also going forward. And to kind of give you an example of what the community would be like, you might be already a member of an online panel. And if not, this is live on Facebook. So it's just like an exclusive Facebook group, but you would be offered the opportunity to answer a question every week, or a few questions, and let us know what your thoughts are on those matters.
Absolutely. So rather than me just asking random questions, there's a bit more structure to it and a bit more thought behind it, and we can get some really useful results from it. That sounds right? Yeah. Great. Okay. Well, I mean, again, just any questions coming through either on Elizabeth's section earlier, or some of the stats that we've discussed, whether they sound about right to you, tell us what you think. Really, does that kind of resonate, or is there anything we've said so far that perhaps doesn't really quite strike the chord? I'm interested again about this question of confidence and trust. So you've said we conducted this poll when really people had seen leaks in the press, perhaps more than the strict guidance. So bearing that in mind, what were the findings related to confidence and trust in terms of returning to the workplace at that point?
So, perhaps not surprisingly, just over half of managers said that when deciding to reopen their business, their organization's senior leaders would most likely listen to the government. And 1/4 of them said that they will listen equally to the government, staff, and customers. But, we can already notice that it would be, in terms of priorities, it's the government sets the role. that's what the data says.
Absolutely. And interestingly, when the guidance came out, obviously risk assessments they were advising needed to be conducted with staff and trade unions. So in one sense, the guidance itself pushes more for collaboration in terms of preparing workers to go back to work, which is, I believe, a good sign. So in terms of the impact on staff, what do we know about concerns that staff actually have? Do our managers, have they reported concerns specifically?
Yes, we had 69% of the managers stating that some or most of their staff have expressed concerns about returning to work. And amongst the most voiced concerns, there was the general risk of contacting the virus, very understandable, not feeling comfortable about working closely with others. Perhaps, again, the fear of contacting the virus was flaring. Continuing to manage childcare responsibilities, and childcare has been a recurring theme throughout our surveys and polls during this period. So it's a very important matter for our managers and also for their team. And the other one was not wanting to use public transport.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And again, these are some of the issues that were picked up by Elizabeth earlier that, I think she kind of really brought to life, some of these comments as well. So, that's all really interesting. And so, as we said, that was then prior to the announcement, that was based on rumor and what was being reported in the media. What are we doing at CMI to explore this further?
The good news is we are working on something that is aimed as, assessing the impact on staff and flexibility post-COVID-19. The bad news is I haven't yet looked at the data, so unfortunately it's too early to say anything. But again, do keep an eye out, and the findings should be coming your way in a couple of weeks.
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And yeah, welcome to CMI. I know obviously it's only your second or third week now, so off to a very strong start. Fantastic. So thanks ever so much for joining us, Madalena. It looks like our members are being a little quieter this week than they were last week. So, if you do have any questions, please do post them. It'd be great to hear from you. But otherwise, then I say thank you to Madalena, and have a lovely evening for what is left of it. And I'd like to invite Hannah back to tell you a little bit more about what's coming up at CMI.
Hello again, everybody. So I just wanted to let you guys know that next week, our event, same time next week, will be with Sandra McLeod, who is a CMI companion and group CEO of Echo Research. And so she'll be joining us to discuss our crisis management theme in terms of managing reputational risk. And if you can't get enough of CMI content, we also have our weekly Better Managers briefing, which is every Friday from 1:15, led by our CEO, Anne Franke. And this Friday, she is going to be joined by Lord Mark Price from Engaging Works. We also have our Future Leaders podcast, which you can find on CMI's SoundCloud. And this week, we're talking all things new lockdown guidance and handy presentation skills, because those will serve you well even when you are working remotely. And in exciting news, we have our Manager's Voice community launching on Friday. So keep an eye on the Facebook group for much more information. And I think that's all from us for tonight. So what we'd love from you is to find out what you'd like to see in further events from CMI Women, whether it's this series or others. And we'd love to hear your stories of flexible working from before the crisis, during the crisis, and what you think it might mean moving forwards. You've had some inspiration this evening from what Elizabeth has been sharing with us, and we'd love to hear what you think. So please do let us know. But for now, I will leave you to your evenings and say thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Take care, everyone.